All right, welcome back to another episode of Phoenix Edge. This is an RPG and gaming news podcast. My name is Hat.
And I am Stan.
And today we are going to be talking about the Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2. We do have two guests joining us today. We have Riconius. How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
It's going pretty good. And then we have Kaleb. How are you?
Hey, doing good, man. Doing good.
Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about what we're going to be getting into today, and then we'll visit a little bit, let you guys plug your stuff and talk about what you guys do. But on today's podcast, like I said earlier, we're going to be talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 2. We've all had a chance to play the game and kind of sit with it for a little bit, and we're going to be pondering about what we want to see in the second game. Each of us has three things that we're going to be bringing up here today. So it should be a pretty good discussion. By the way, I don't think I mentioned at the top of this podcast, but Eric isn't joining us today. He had to stay late, but it's okay. We got 4 people here, so it should be a good conversation. With that said, let's go ahead and start with Riconius here. I know that you have a YouTube page that you were doing a lot of various content on. What are you currently doing right now that you want people to know about?
Well, right now I'm working on some comic books. Working on a personal project that's an independent thing, and the other thing was a short story that I did for a publisher this past summer called Saturday AM. That's the name of the publisher, and so they have like 125 issues now, and my short story was in issue 122, and they have a free app where you could go and download and read the digital magazine.
What's the app called?
So, Saturday AM Global Comics, I believe. Okay.
And they just go to like the Play Store and download that, or is it?
Yeah, iOS, the Android Play Store or Google Play Store. And I think they also have an app for Kindle, if anyone has that, but I'm not sure. I think so. Yeah. They have really cool comics from all over the world, and kind of like mostly with like that manga aesthetic, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was really cool this past summer for their summer event, and that was fun to do. Yeah.
That's exciting. That's really cool. Nice. Well, yeah, I'll be sure to leave some kind of link in the description so that way you guys can check more of it out. Also, you were having a YouTube channel that you were doing for a while there, so we'll be sure to leave a link in the description for that, for some of the content you have on there as well. A lot of Kingdom Hearts stuff on there, and then some other unique stuff as well, right?
Yeah. And I'm thinking of what to do next. Kind of been stepping away from just focusing on Kingdom Hearts. But I still do, live streams too. That's on my Twitch. But I mean, I'm thinking of like doing, I don't know, different things. Just okay, kind of evolving.
What's your Twitch?
Riconius Live. It's creative, right?
Hey, man, it gets the messages across. Okay, well, we'll put it in the description. That way people can check that out as well. So very cool. And we have Kaleb joining us from the multiple podcasts. How are you? And
hey.
Why don't you tell us, everybody, where you're from?
Yeah, so, well, I mean, I'm from Utah, but the biggest
stuff
thing
we
that
care about.
Oh, okay. I mean, you should care. It's pretty sweet. But no, the big thing that I've been doing is the last about 6 years. Yeah, it's over 6 years now. We've been doing a podcast, me and one of my buddies, Joe, called Ultima Final Fantasy, where we go through all of the Final Fantasy games in order. So we've done everything through the main series, all of the spin-offs, the sequels, the prequels, and now we're working on Final Fantasy XIV's newest expansion, Shadowbringers. We just barely got through the content leading up to that expansion because they release it every like 3 months. They release a little patch, and so we finished all of that, and now we're ready to start that up. So that's been a crazy long journey, and we're kind of in like the twilight of the show, even though it's probably going to be like another year and a half, if not more. So it's like a really long twilight. It's like it's like Twilight in Alaska, like the sun, it never really goes down, but it's like almost there. It's almost going down behind the horizon. But So we've done that for years, and it's been a blast. And then I also do Nudeclan, which is another video game podcast, and it's kind of a general show. We do a lot of RPGs over there as well. We just barely did a Suikoden 2 review on that show. So it's the biggest draw from our audience is our Final Fantasy audience. So like when we put games up to vote on, like the RPGs always win kind of a thing. So we do a lot of RPGs over there, even though it's not officially an RPG podcast. And that one we've been doing for, I think probably like 4 years now. So a lot of podcasts. I really enjoy it. And it's, that's how me and Hat met was through, I think he was listening to some Ultima and he got on the old forums, one of the many versions of our forums that we've had over the years.
So when we first started this podcast, we were trying to get the word out, and you guys, I think I asked if I could post our podcast on your forum one time, and you were like, yeah, go ahead. And then I just did it every time for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
you guys never complained, but you're always very good about it. So definitely appreciate that. But dude, I was listening to the Ultima Final Fantasy podcast for, I think like all the way through college. I was listening to it like weekly. So very, very cool to have you on here again. So
yeah. It's I love coming on to the shows. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, gents, let's get into some Final Fantasy VII Remake. Now, I think it's going to be a little bit of an icebreaker here to just kind of, if we can quickly just say like within like a minute or so, what our thoughts were of the original game, just because we have some 2 new faces on here and to just kind of set the groundwork. So, Riconius, why don't we go ahead and start with you, if you don't mind? Just, did you like the game? You don't have to give like a 15-minute essay on it, but just, you're just, if I were to ask you on the street, what would you say?
Now, when you say original game,
okay, the remake, the part 1.
I thought, for the most part, I had fun. I think I really enjoyed a lot of, for sure, the graphics were stunning. Kind of seeing a lot of the places that I remember from the original game in this HD photorealistic setting. It was really cool to see. Yeah, for the most part, I liked it. The things I had trouble with were some of the added things or even some changes.
This is a spoiler podcast, by the way. Final Fantasy VII, complete spoilers. Remake, complete spoilers.
Right. I hate the Dementors. No, I'm kidding.
Spoiler. Yeah.
But yeah, like it was a strange choice, I think, to add the whole time destiny ghost thing. It's just strange because then it's like in the middle of a scene that I'm really digging, Yeah. Like it's really cool, and all of a sudden I just see these things flying through. I'm like, wait a minute, why are they here? And then like when what is it, Sector 7 when it's when the plates drop in, right?
Yeah. They just wouldn't let you get to that plate.
I think it was actually before that when like we see Avalanche just being massacred, and then like seeing those Dementors flying around. I'm like, why? Like what are they gonna do? Like, are they like stopping what's happening? And I guess they did, kind of. So like I guess the characters don't die, and so it's like, well, then why do I care anymore? Right. Like, this is the point where I'm supposed to care. I'm supposed to be like, what? No, my friends. But then I wasn't, because they didn't die. So
I mean, that's basically my thoughts in a nutshell. I thought they were killing it with everything that was kind of a recreation of the original. Some of the fleshing out with Avalanche was awesome.
Yeah.
But anytime those damn ghosts appeared, like it's just 9 times out of 10, I didn't like it. But Kaleb, what'd you think?
I think it's a pretty good game. And honestly, the one thing that I didn't want them to do was what you guys, what was it you were just talking about? I didn't want like a full HD recreation, beat by beat of the original game. And going into this thing, I was just like, God, this is like, I paid so much money for this because I'm such a chump. I bought like the Screw You edition with the motorcycle. The motorcycle's pretty cool, but honestly, the toy, I'm not so into the Cloud toy. But I played it and I was like, you know what? I'm going to try to have an open mind. And honestly, I think that's probably some of my favorite parts of it. Not necessarily the Dementors per se, but I think the fact that they decided that, you know what? No, this is not only Final Fantasy VII Remake. This is kind of Final Fantasy VII prequel and or like alternate universe version of it. I still haven't decided which one I think it actually is, whether it's this is the events of Final Fantasy VII are on like some kind of weird time loop, which is sort of alluded to in the end, or it's the events of Final Fantasy VII have already happened and it's like a Wheel of Time situation where like ages come and go and like blah, 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 all that bullshit. And like it's slight, there are slight differences, and then maybe they're trying to keep it on track, and then we're fighting that keeping on track. And so with them creating it in that way, it makes it a new experience, even if you have played the original game a ton, because then it's like, well, we're not just, I'm not coming back to see Midgar, which was to me the most boring part of the original game. There's like so much more in there. It's like, well, I mean, is Aerith even going to die? Like, what's going to happen with this story? And it's weird because they marketed it perfectly, I would say, to where no one knew that going in. And then when you play it, you're like, oh, wow, the remake, I thought that was a really stupid tagline. But no, it actually kind of makes sense that they put that as part of the name, because like when they made, God of War 4 and they just kind of rebooted it, it was just God of War. And like that was something I harped on for like months before it came out. It's like, why would they put remake in the title? And then they put it out and I'm like, that's why, because it works. It makes sense.
Yeah.
And one of the other things that I was worried about that they ended up doing anyway was incorporating some of their like the extended universe stuff, like that Turk, the Kids Are All Right book.
Yeah, that was cool stuff.
I hate that thing. I hate it so much.
Well, I mean, it was cool that they incorporated it in the game, not the original source material.
No, I hate it. But it's funny because I was like, they better not do that shit. They better not put any Advent Children or like Turks bullshit in there. And then they did, and I was like, you know what? It works actually. So screw me. Like they did exactly what I told them not to, and then they made it work. So I'm just like, I was surprised, honestly. I was very surprised that I ended up enjoying it as much as I did. So
yeah. Stan, you want to? I mean, we got a podcast about it, but go ahead and
we talked about it extensively. For me, I enjoyed kind of seeing the recreation of like the big story moments, and I also really once it found its groove, I really liked the combat for the most part.
Yeah,
outside of a few nitpicks, a few issues here and there. But I am kind of with Hat in that I didn't want to see a ton of stuff added to the story. I wanted to see kind of an expansion of the concepts and characters that were already there. But they kind of went crazy at certain points with the addition of the ghosts, right? The time ghosts or Dementors or whatever you want to call them. I was not a big fan of that, and I felt that they kind of detracted from pretty much every scene that they were in, but it had a purpose. I just kind of wish that I don't agree with the story choice essentially for those, and that makes it tough for me to kind of sweep those under the rug as much as like some of the other things I disagree with, but overall it's a very solid game. Like I don't think it's a bad game at all. I enjoyed 90+% of my time playing the game. So
yeah, I mean, when I think of the game as Crisis Core 3, or effectively the sequel to Final Fantasy VII, I actually kind of like the game. But when I think of it as a remake, of the original, like as a replacement of the original, suddenly I become way more critical. So it's kind of how you frame it. We could talk about this. I mean, we had multi-hour discussion on this, and Kaleb, I know you guys talked like for 5 hours on on the remake, right?
Yeah, it was a pretty long one. It was like 5.5 hours. Yeah.
So let's go ahead and jump into kind of our thoughts with part 2. Obviously, we haven't played part 2, so we'll still probably be referencing the prior game. But let's start off with you, Riconius. What's your number one thing that you want to see in part 2, or one of them, anyways?
I think the first one I'll touch on is because I don't know like how much of the game will be redone for part 2, because like last time it was just all Midgar, so like I wonder what they could expand. But like if we do get up to this point, I mean, like the Golden Saucer sounds like a really fun time. I want to see how they would redo the mini games, and because sort of like with the some of the dancing stuff in the first one, they definitely expanded on that whole sequence, or even like the squats and stuff. So for the golden saucer, like I would like to see, what was it, like that boxing one, right? One that I'm curious if they would like expand it like a whole lot would be like the haunted house part. If they would make that its own like a legitimate haunted house, you know what I mean? Like I think that would be kind of interesting to see, even though it would be like seemingly random
Right.
to just like have that stuck in there. But I mean, like as like just side content, like to make it an expansive game like they're trying to do with like they even did with the first part, where it's not just the recreation, but even like expanding on it, adding some more detail to the environment. So yeah, golden saucer for sure.
Gold Saucer would be a really cool place to see like re-envisioned with PlayStation 5, because first off, the mini games in the original game were pretty, like they weren't very good. I mean, when I was a kid, I liked them because you could sit there and play basketball and stuff, but I'm sorry, like the submarine game, not a big fan.
We can make a much better submarine game now, right? With full 3D HD graphics, yeah.
Right.
Or even like the betting on the chocobo race, like that'd be
chocobo racing is going to be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Well, around there too is that the first time you visit anyways, that's when we get that whole sequence with Barret and Dine, right? Down in the prison where they were, which was just such an awesome scene. So to get to see how that's going to play out too, because that's one of my favorite parts of Final Fantasy VII, dealing with this person that Barret thought was dead, and just that scene with him committing suicide, dying. It was just, every time I watch it, it leaves me almost speechless, because it's just, Jesus, this is so freaking gritty. What's this? What's the rating of this game? A teen? This should be teen, No. So yeah, I agree, man. That's going to be really, really cool to see for sure. Kaleb, what do you got?
All right, so the first one, honestly, was what you just brought up. I want them to have the Dine part with Barret to be, I want it to be extended, and I want it to be almost like a, I'm not sure if I want it to be something where Cloud, like, I don't know. Because there's moments in the original game where Cloud will, like, it almost seems like they're flashbacks. No, it's them telling the story. That's what it is. So I want it to be like a gritty, like a really gritty and dark scene where, Barrett's like walking around and people are accusing him of, being the killer and stuff like that. And he's trying to figure out what the hell's going on with this town. And I really hope they expand on that, because I think that's a really good, I agree with you, Had. I think that's one of the best parts of that section of the game. And that's basically where we're up to in the remake, if they were to actually go forward with the original story, which honestly, I have no idea where they're going to go from where we got to. I mean, going into like Singularity, who knows what happens after that. But I think that's an important story part nonetheless, even if they just do it in like a flashback like they did before. Obviously, it would be something that I would want to control. So I'd want to like be playing as young Barret, hopefully with like some kind of killer fro or some like crazy like 80s.
Maybe he's got some new moves with both of his hands, right?
Yeah. He's got both hands. So like maybe he's just a physical guy, because that's the one thing about the game that I was always like, man, this guy like lifts so much weights just to only shoot guns. Like it seems crazy. He's like he's the biggest guy in the entire world, and he eats strictly guns.
Yeah. If you got hit with that hand, you'd probably equally lethal. Yeah, for sure.
I will say the most amusing parts of the game was part one was when I was like, had Barret in the party with a melee attack thing, and he would like cock it like he had his gun arm on, and like it kept the animation. I was like, nice. He's got the freaking crab claw thing, and I was like, dude, if you could shoot that, it'd be ridiculous. Just cutting off legs. But yeah, I want him to make it like a really dark, not quite like horror, but like a really thriller / kind of suspense thing. I'm thinking kind of what they did with the chapter 13, I believe it was, in Final Fantasy 15, where it's like this, it's a total change where it's like you're exploring, and it's almost like a survival horror game. It's like really creepy kind of a thing, but more like, I don't know, more like LA Noir, not so much the investigation, but like not horror per se, but just kind of like creepy and unsettling. I want that to be like a big section of this game, and I think regardless of the direction that they go with part 2, I think they're going to have to go through that section of the story because it's important to Barret and Marlene, obviously, and they're still in the game. So
they got to get that far for sure. Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Like, it could be really cool to play young Barret and kind of walk around the Corel town how it was when it was still they were going with coal power. It was like all coal powered, and people were generally happy, but they were trying to transition to the Shinra power, and you could kind of walk around and talk to people before. But then when you go back, you go back to the current time, then you can walk around the same environment and just see how it's all destroyed, and that could be pretty powerful.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're gonna have to see though, because I mean, if they go at the pace that we got for the remake, where they expanded 5 hours into 40 hours, we're gonna be fighting the Midgar Zolom as like the final boss of part 2.
I still don't, yeah.
But I think that they have to speed it up after this. I think that would just be absurd to spend that much money and just make a snail's pace. That doesn't make any sense to me. But honestly, like, this kind of bleeds into what I have for my number one. I want them to, part 1, they really had a strong theme of Destiny that they kind of put in there. And I want them to focus more on the character conflicts and kind of drop the Destiny line, because while it kind of worked, when you replay the remake, you see these ghosts and you see how they're messing with things, and you see what Aerith knows, and she seems to know more than she lets on. It works. It's just, I feel that having Destiny be a prominent theme undermines the character conflict, because Barret, he feels bad for falling for Shinra and convincing people in his town to accept Shinra, right? He just feels guilty for this, and the repercussions for that, and the repercussions for, hey, like, I got involved in this, Shinra dropped a plate to kill us. There's a lot of things here that they're trying to deal with that I think is undermined if you throw Destiny in there, because then Barret can just say, well, I didn't have any personal agency in my prior choices because there were these ghosts that were making sure that was going to happen. But now that we killed the Harbinger of Fate, the Destiny God, now I'm in control of my own actions, so I don't have to worry about the things I did before. They can still make it work now. I think they just need to just kind of let that be the theme of part 1 and just kind of go to something new for part 2.
So to me, what the whole Destiny thing reminded me of, like, Final Fantasy 12 with what Vayne Solidor was trying to do, because he figured out that, like, the Ocuria, the gods of Evil East, basically were predestined, or they're writing down the destiny of mankind, and his whole shtick was like, we need to bring mankind back into the control of their own destiny. And one of the Ocuria was like, one of the gods, like, was against the others and was trying to help Vayne do that. And to me, the 7 remake, the end is just, if Vayne would have won in his universe, that's like the equivalent in the 7 universe. Like, we were able to actually take power back from ourselves. But you're right. Honestly, it's almost kind of a lazy plot point. It's almost like an ever useful Deus Ex Machina situation where it's like, well, we did it because Destiny. It's like, I just had to. I was predestined to do this thing. And it's like, well, it just seems kind of lazy, because then if you have some weird plot twist, it doesn't seem as powerful. It seems like, oh no, I was just supposed to do that. It's like, well
yeah. And like, what are the rules behind this? I mean, okay, now that you beat the Destiny God, Zack didn't die. Well, then did President Shinra die? Is President Shinra still alive?
No, he's dead.
Or is Barret supposed to be dead now because the ghost brought him back? I mean, how far do we want to do this?
He just grabs his chest. He's like, "Oh shit!" And he's passing out. Oh shit! We killed Barret. Yeah, that's a good point, though. Yeah, they did all save him. So, like, now that they're dead, I mean,
why are they picking and choosing what's undone and what is done?
Yeah, is this kind of? Yeah, that's true. Yeah, what is?
I don't even understand. Like, is it even? And that's why, because even the way the scene was directed, like when we see like Zack walking back, it's like not really him there. It's like if it's they're looking at
alternate dimension or something.
Yeah. So then that whole timeline thing, like,
yeah, was it a timeline thing, or was that him like us seeing that he did live back then, and it's like a vision of what happened? But yeah, you're right. That's ridiculous. When does like what do they?
Will Cloud like suddenly remember like, oh, Zach's alive now? Like, what's gonna happen? Like,
but I wish they would have done something like that movie Arrival, where like the beginning, the chick just starts, she like hears voices, and it makes it seem like she's like haunted by something. But really what she's haunted by is something that hasn't happened yet. And it's really cool, but they didn't do that in this game. They just made it really bullshit. Bringing that up, you're right. Like, what if they're able to kill the gods of time and that stops Zach from dying? Then what stops Barret from not dying? Because they saved Barret. Like, is it because they didn't kill Zach inherently? Like, I don't know.
Well, I guess you could make an argument that because Barret was in like he stepped through that portal, maybe he's immune. Right. But I got to think that there's got to be other things in the story, too, that were undone. Right. I mean, we saw Biggs and Jesse live. So I'm like, why are they living? Why not President Shinra? I mean, because that was supposed to happen. I mean, certainly he would be revived.
Yeah. How did they get out? Like, the plate fell, man. Like, Biggs, I guess. Wedge is dead. I mean, Wedge is like a pancake, but I don't know if they can undo that. But Biggs and Jesse, they were on the plate, so then the plate like exploded. Like, I don't know how they can manage that, especially because in that section it almost seemed like the fate things, the Dementors kind of wanted this to happen. They weren't interfering like they were with Wedge later, because Wedge was supposed to die at the plate, kind of a thing, right?
Right.
So how did they live without their help? And then if they got help from them, why would they help them if they're trying to keep the timeline pure? Because that's what the Dementor guys to me were. It was like trying to force the events of Final Fantasy VII, the original game, to happen. And then whenever anything happened outside of that, it was because we fought back against them and we won, kind of a thing. Mm-hmm. So like, why are those two alive at the end? Why do we see her like gloves and him waking up in the bed unless they saved him?
This is the type of stuff I want them to not do. I don't want to be asking these questions for part 2, because it's just going to get really messy. And we need Jesse, and we need Biggs, we need Wedge to have died. We need some kind of impact for that plate falling. We need some emotional impact for that. And I think that us sitting here asking these questions like, well, why is Barret alive? That's gonna bother me for the whole game, right? While I'm sitting there watching him like interacting with Dyne, and they're having that epic shootout, like I'm gonna be sitting there thinking like he should be dead. It's just gonna bug me. So if they could stop introducing stuff like this, I think that would be for the benefit of part 2. Stan, what do you got?
Okay, so my first one I have here is kind of more of just a general plan for like an improvement. That would be the environments and the level design need to be expanded, like more open, right? So the game was very linear, which makes sense because it's Midgar was a linear section in the original game, and also because it seems like there was cases where the hardware was kind of holding back their ambition for the game, because there's a lot of moments where you're traversing and the game has to artificially slow your progress, either by making you walk slow so that it can load the next area,
right? Or
it's like walk up to this door now, push and hold triangle while we load in the assets, right, of the next room.
No, they were high-fiving, Stan. They were high-fiving.
Yeah. Hey, that was cute. Anyway,
no, until you're climbing the plate, and then they just said screw it, and it just looks like dog shit.
Yeah.
Like, man, this looks awful.
I didn't even notice.
Like, what would be worse, just having it look like crap, or putting another high five in here?
Well, I didn't even notice that thing with like the background or whatever. Like until someone pointed it out on Twitter. Then I went back. I played that part. I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, it is like a PNG just stuck there. Like,
yeah, it's like they threw back to the old like pre-rendered backgrounds, but it looks worse somehow.
Because of the contrast, right? Because of the contrast of like the
yeah.
that look look amazing. Yeah.
I could see Cloud's pores, but
somebody in like a YouTube comment said that they were trying to recapture the 90s feel by doing it the same way. And I'm like, no.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think so. They would have done it more than the one time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But just in general, like, Midgar is like split into sectors and like areas where you go to. So it makes sense that, you only have like one path to get from one place to another, because anything that's not like a village, I guess you would say, like in Sector 7 or Sector 5 is a junkyard, right? So we don't need like open junkyard areas. But now that you're leaving the city, a big part of the original game was kind of that, like when you hit the world map, like a lot of players remember really fondly, like, oh, like the game is so much bigger now than I thought it was going to be. And even though there wasn't that many locations on the world map that you could visit, just the sense of scale, where it was like, here's Midgar, I can see it on the map, and this village I have to go to, Calm, is like 6 Midgars away, right? And so that gave you the sense of like, oh, this is like a really big world I'm entering.
A quarter of a Midgar away, but yeah. Anyways.
Well, like to scale.
Yeah, I gotcha.
But yeah, so I don't think they necessarily need to have like open world like Final Fantasy 15. They just need each zone that you visit to be more than like a straight line with a series of enemies to fight. It needs to have more of an open level design. Or if they can't do that for some reason, and they still have to have linear like levels, they need to be quicker. Like you need to get through them faster. They need to be better, better paced. Like, because like if the train graveyard section was like an open, like a more open level design, it might make sense and feel better that it took 2 hours to get through it, right? But because it was just progressing like in a linear path, it grinds on people,
and it was right after a 2-hour dungeon,
yeah. So like better pacing and more open level design, which if you can do both, that's ideal, right? But if you can't, then I think picking a more open level design will make people happier coming off of the previous game. It'll make the game feel different in how you progress through it. So,
but you don't necessarily want it to be open world, right? So we're not talking like Witcher 3, Final Fantasy 7 Remake Part 2.
Open world has a lot of like if the plot of the game is still you're supposed to be pursuing Sephiroth, right? Then it doesn't make a lot of sense to at the beginning of the game have an open world, and like
I'm going to push back on you a little bit, but
we
keep
can
going.
make it to Calm in 20 hours. Like who cares, right? We got to hunt these monsters or catch these frogs or help out this guy with his car repairs or whatever, like basically I don't trust them to have interesting open world quest design. So I don't want them to work up that tree. So
I agree with you on that front that having played 15, they should not make open world games, because that had some like dated stuff. Like I bought that game in 2016 and like some of the side quest mechanics were like from like 2002, so it was like, but Final Fantasy 14, they're able to do it. So a little bit, but I will push back a little bit because, Witcher 3, the story for that works so well as an open world game because you're searching for Ciri, like it's a needle in a haystack type story.
Yeah, you don't know where she is.
And I think with Final Fantasy 7 now, it's the search for Sephiroth. You don't know where he is. So, and it could work that way. It's just, like you said, Square Enix doesn't have the...
Yeah, okay, so if...
I don't have the confidence in them to do it well. They're much better just making a JRPG.
If they're going to go with that angle, then I would change the way the second continent is kind of progressed through compared to the original game, so that you could visit like, say, Cosmo Canyon or Nibelheim or Gold Saucer, right, in kind of up to the player, like what order they want to visit those locations in, and then you can make it more open design, right? You can have those locations off in the distance and like kind of a big hub area in the middle, which is the continent, I guess, or like the wilderness, you'd call it, and then have them visit those locations. But if you're still going to progress through the original plot as it was, then I don't see kind of an like an open quest design really benefiting that very much. So
Yeah, I mean, I think that they could do a semi portion of that, maybe something like the Final Fantasy 12 openness, where it's kind of big areas, but it's just more open. And
Yeah.
it seems kind of open world, but it's not so open to where I can go to the City of the Ancients within 10 minutes. You know?
Yeah,
Breath of the Wild, just like
Well, let's
right
just
there.
go here for a while. Let's skip all this other crap. I already know what to do if Aerith doesn't. Yeah. But anyways, so I don't know. We'll have to see.
Mhm.
Riconius, what do you have for your number 2?
Well, kind of jumping off the whole thing with like openness.
Mhm.
I'm just curious, like what they would do for implementing like the world map and just that whole open area, like between the towns and whatnot. Like what, like how would that translate to how they've made the first part? Like, so that's why like I'm thinking like if it were open, like would it really just be us like just walking through just mountains and fields till we get to the next place? Like, I don't know, like how, especially if they want to still have it be a remake, even though it's more like a subtitle to the story. Like, but like if their goal is still to kind of market it as like, hey, this is Final Fantasy VII,
Mhm.
then I mean, I just want to know like what they would do for that, because I know like
Just
in the
getting
original,
from point A to point B?
yeah, because like in the original, I mean, it was just like a place to get random encounters mostly. you know?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So like, what are they going to do now? Like, if it's as they did part 1, you know, like, are we going to have little quests in between, you know, or
Do we know if Toriyama's working on this game? Toriyama being he was the director of Final Fantasy X-2. He was the director of Final Fantasy 13, and he worked on the 7 remake. And that guy likes his his linear stuff.
He likes his convolution too. I don't think they can use any more of that.
Well, I found out, this is a slight tangent. We can go back to what Riconius said, but I found out that he also designed the wall market in the original game, Final Fantasy 7. And I was like, oh, this makes sense. Because 10-2 is like if they took wall market and made like a game out of it.
Yeah.
You know, but anyways, yeah, that is kind of a interesting query though. How are they going to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I could see it being, and you guys both are kind of on the same, you guys both have a similar point, and it's like, are we going to have like a Witcher 3 where it's all wide open, which we know 15, yeah, I think 15 is a pretty good game, but honestly, the openness, I don't really know how much good it does. I mean, the best part about it is just the way in which they told, you know, bro stories while they were driving around. That was probably like the strongest character development in the game. But like, are we going to get something like that again? I don't know if we really need it for the 7 guys, but it's like, are we going to have wide open areas when you get to those areas? So is it going to be like a Final Fantasy 12 with the teleport crystal thing where you teleport into a zone and like it's this big expansive area and you get a lot of different areas to explore? And then the main world is loosely connected like FF12, or is it going to be like a Final Fantasy 10 thing where you choose from a list and you only go there and you don't really get to explore the main world outside of areas that happen to connect to the area that you're in? And that's a good point. And I don't know what they're going to do with that, honestly. Because this is, I mean, obviously part 1 is super linear and it's not open in mostly in any way at all. But the rest of the game, like, are they going to have a Type 0 style open world map, which is probably the most recent game I can think of that has the world map like we used to have it.
In
is
a
it going to
Final
be
Fantasy game, yeah.
Yeah, where it's like not to scale again, or are they going to make it to scale and then make it really boring? Because that'd be the risk with like, oh, we have 5 miles to walk. Well, screw
how
it, I don't want to play this.
Yeah, how do you fill that with interesting content? Yeah.
Well, it's kind of interesting though, because I know that when I first played the original and you take that step outside of Midgar, I remember back in like when I was a kid, it felt really open. Like I could just go anywhere. But when I play it now, I'm like, okay, clearly you want me to go to Cosmo Canyon. Because that's the only place I can go to next, you know? So it's not like it. I think it was intended to feel open when it was made, but having been 25 years, it's dated.
Yeah, it's the lie of non-linearity, and a lot of those old games do that. Like FF9,
Mhm.
it feels really open compared to like 10 and 13, and it is arguably definitely more open than 13. But there's a lot of places in 9 where you'll like try to go to some area, and then it'll be like, "Oh, sorry, wrong way, Koopa," or something like that. And it's like, yeah, like there's physical space in which to walk, but there's nowhere to go. You know what I mean? It's like, so who are we kidding here? Like, is it linear or is it not linear? It's like I have like shoulder room in one game, and then in the other game I have to like turn sideways when I'm passing somebody in the hallway. But like both of them are linear, you know.
Yeah.
And that is going to be interesting to see. And that's one of the things that you brought up just now, though, is like the scale of how this world is set up and how like liberating it is when you get outside of Midgar.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I don't know if they're going to get rid of that. So I think they might make it just this big, huge
Field.
world. Yeah, and like a big area, because you get out of the city and you're like, finally, I'm free. And I feel like I don't know if they're going to let that go by the wayside. That like feeling of open world, and like if there's anything about 7 Remake that's great, is just like the scale of everything. Like everything is huge. You know,
Yeah.
like even the claw hand section in the damn the sector. It's like, oh well, you remember that one claw hand that you touched that one time? Now there's like 5 claw hands.
These cities have these cities have junkyards 4 times the size of the the sector it supports. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, the junkyard's bigger than the damn city. It's like, so I mean, I don't know. I think I'd be surprised if they sacrificed the scale, because like if anything, the 7 Remake is like, wow, this area is huge, and you remember like, oh, I remember how this area looked in the OG game, and it's just a massive version of that. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do.
Yeah, I think that just one slight little detail on this too is in the original, I think it kind of worked though a little bit. It seemed less linear because there was always options, right? Okay, first you go to Calm, and then after that you have the option of getting the Chocobo, or you can try to fight the Midgar Zolom, right? So you have that option, and then when you get past that, you can go to Fort Condor, or you can go to Junon, or you can get Yuffie, or you can do all 3, you know? So like when you get the gold saucer, there's more choices. So even though it's linear, there was choices. Whereas I think 13, that's there were no choices, right? It was character progression one way, go forward. There might be a little hallway with a chest, but outside of that, there weren't choices. But the remake part 1 had that too, where you would get somewhere and there would be you'd go find some cats. You know, there would be something else to do except to just continue to go forward. So I guess we'll see. But Kaleb, what do you have for your number 2?
All right, so my number 2, this one's kind of like this one's kind of like a joke one, but I think if they're gonna go forward with their whole incorporating of the extended universe thing that they've had going with part 1. Bringing in like Merle and that one really annoying girl in the market who's like selling info. I can't remember what her name is, but she's from that damn Turks thing too.
Oh, Kyrie or whatever. She's got like the blue outfit. Kyrie, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, her enough. And then that one guy, the guy who's like the gatekeeper for Dawn, whatever his name
Chocobo
is.
Sam. Oh, the guy with the white hair.
Leslie. Yeah, those guys are all from. Those guys are all from that godforsaken book. One of the things that book brings up, though, is it justifies the fact that, you know, we visibly see Rufus Shinra just get blasted out of like the top floor of that damn Shinra building by the weapon that comes out of the ocean. I can't remember which weapon it was, honestly. It's been too long. But he does that huge blast move when they're trying to attack the weapon when they shoot it with the cannon.
Right. At the end of the game, yeah.
Yeah, and he just obliterates the tower, and it looks like it kills Rufus Shinra, and then we get to Advent Children, and then Rufus Shinra is like, he's alive. Like, he's alive and in a wheelchair, so he's like, oh, okay, he's kind of jacked up. Like, that makes sense. But really, it doesn't make any sense, because it's like, how the hell did he live in the first place?
But then he stands up from the wheelchair anyway.
Yeah, so. Then he stands up. Like, what? Okay, so what, you're fine? And this damn book, man, they talk about like this escape hatch. And this is something that me and Joe went on about for like an hour. Over the years, we've just bitched about periodically. Like, what does that look like? Like, is there like a silly slide like on the side of the Shinra building that we just have never seen that angle of? And it's like got all these twists and turns, and they got to hop in a tube, and like Shinra, and like President Shinra just hops in there, and like puts his hands in the air, and that's his little escape hatch. It's like this building is like hundreds of floors high, and like 100 floors high, and like how the hell does he get out of there in any conceivable time frame? So I want them to. I want to see that. I want to see like the water park style escape hatch
for Rufus
on the side of the damn building. Yeah,
well,
for Rufus.
In that case, I also want to see the same slide for Biggs and Jesse, because like not only were they like shot, they were like I thought dead, like they passed out, and then an entire plate falls on them, and then somehow they're just like Biggs just has some bandages around his ribs, you know.
Yeah. It's like, man, it's good thing it only broke 6 of my ribs. That plate could have really caused some damage, but yeah, like the escape hatch thing. And then I feel like I want it to, as much as I don't like the extended universe for the most part of the 7 remake
right.
or the 7 verse. I kind of hope they go more into that and they kind of like try to incorporate it all. And honestly, I want them to sort of retcon it the way Resident Evil has retconned with their recent games. I don't know if you guys play those at all.
I played the number 2 remake 2.
Okay, the canon for Resident Evil is like super jacked up. Like it's really nonsensical in many ways. And the thing I love about the recent remakes that they're doing is they're kind of like fixing all of the canon to make it work for Resident Evil 4, which honestly doesn't really work until Resident Evil 3. In a bunch of different ways. Like it's got a guy from the series, but then like, why are these zombies like weird, controllable, still kind of sentient beings?
Right.
It doesn't explain it. And it's like a way to repair it and like make it all make sense. And that's what I love about their remakes. And with this remake, they've kind of started to incorporate some of that with the Turks, the Kids Are All Right characters and like bringing them in and things like that. I just hope they continue that along that line. And they make the changes that happen in Advent Children, the events of Advent Children and beyond, sort of make more sense and work a little bit better within the confines of the actual original game, which I feel like they struggled with, and is why I generally don't enjoy the extended universe. I mean, even a lot of the stuff in Crisis Core and especially Dirge of Cerberus story-wise, it's like stuff is just ridiculous. Like there's just all these characters that weren't part of the thing, and it's like how many levels of hand-me-down is this damn Buster Sword? Like seriously, like how many freaking people are gonna have before we get to the guy that originally owned it? Like serious, like how many freaking times?
I just love how like Cloud inherits the Buster Sword because he's going to carry on the soldier honor, and then he goes to Midgard and he's like, I'm going to become a mercenary. Oh, that's very honorable. Yeah. But yeah, I mean,
and immediately equip a better sword like right away. Too.
Yeah, like 2 seconds after.
Yeah, maybe if Zach wasn't using the Buster Sword the whole time. Anyways, we're getting off on a tangent, but I agree with you. I agree with you because we just recently did a discussion for Crisis Core. We replayed it and discussed it, and I was kind of reading up before we did the podcast, just kind of like on some of the like history of it. And that game, they had all this extra story planned, but then it was like a limitation of space on the PSP where like it just wasn't going to be able to hold it all. And they started just making cuts. And that's why certain things feel out of left field, like with Angeal and Genesis, and like it just wasn't fully developed. And I'm not so sure that still would have worked if it was fully developed because some of it's just wacky. But I wouldn't mind them taking another stab at certain elements of that and kind of smoothing it out a little bit and making it, because like Crisis Core is a thing where like if they were remaking Crisis Core, I would be less nervous because like the bar's not so high, right? Like if you F this up, it's probably going to be within like the wheelhouse of, of the original, you know, but anyways, so if they could, yeah, I agree. If they could kind of smooth some of that stuff out and make it work a little bit better, I totally agree. So, Stan, what do you got?
All right. So my second change, and this is one I've put some thought into for last few months, is this is a gameplay change. All right. So, but I think it can have some positive effects for the story as well.
Okay.
I think they should implement a character swapping system mid-battle, similar to Final Fantasy X. right? That
Okay.
allows you to maybe you have to spend an ATB bar to do it, right? Not just do it for free, because in an action game you could kind of abuse that to, like avoid a big attack that's coming your way, and then all of a sudden just switch characters and they avoid it,
Mm-hmm.
So maybe you spend an ATB bar to switch into Cloud out for Red 13, for example. But then Red 13 has been building up his ATB on the bench, right, so to speak. And so he can come in with 2 ATB bars when Cloud swapped out with 1.
Right.
So that would really incentivize the player to be like, oh, I'm out of ATB, let me swap Tifa for Vincent or whatever. And then like, oh, now Vincent's out, let me swap him for Barret. And so you can kind of use like all your characters in combat if you want to, or you can just play it as the game was originally. And so I think there's 3 big benefits for this. Number 1, you can eliminate the aerial combat in the game altogether, because if you have characters that can come into the battle at any time with ranged abilities, then you don't have to have any melee characters with the ability to like leap 30 feet into the air and like awkwardly slash at the guy on a jetpack as he like flies away.
You can't even see the enemy half the time. Yeah.
And like some of the spells that they had that were, I think, designed to kind of stun the aerial enemies, like the arrow and blizzard, were not always very effective. Like that, they could dodge, and then you just spent your ATB bar on your magic spell that completely whiffed. And so I think most people agree the aerial combat was pretty lackluster. And so I would say the best way to fix it would actually be to remove it completely, and then have the characters have more creative ways of like either hitting the enemy as they're up there, or maybe like with Barret and Aerith, for example, with their ranged attacks, or maybe like Sid has a unique ability to like actually jump up there and bring the enemy down to the ground with him, so that like the other characters can gang up on that enemy while they're grounded, something like that. So that's the first thing. I think that's just an easy fix, essentially.
Just to give a little bit more incentive to switch between the characters and give it a little bit different of a feel. I can get behind
and
that.
you could take it even further and have like maybe there's some enemies that are like armored type enemies, and you need Cloud's Buster Sword and like his like heavy swing mode, his what was it called, not Operator, but the other one, the heavy sword strike mode that he had.
Yeah.
Like you need him to use that to like break the enemy's guard, and then everybody can kind of rush in and finish that enemy off, stuff like that, so that each character kind of has a role in the combat scenarios.
Yeah, that would probably increase the speed of the combat too, because like one of the weird things about the remake is like, for as many times as you can slow-mo the game, it feels really fast combat-wise, and I think that would add another element to that, where you're bringing in dudes off the bench for their specialty kind of enemies, where like Final Fantasy X, like you mentioned, that's such a genius system in that game, where it's like, oh, we got a flying guy, let's bring in the dude with his like, half deflated basketball or whatever to just knock him in the air. And like it seems to make it faster, even though like we go into this weird stasis slow-mo thing. I think that would increase the speed, and then it would give you a reason to play those other characters too, because like during the game they're all there. You know what I mean? Like they're present. They're just not being played as. And I think making it like FF10, where it not only incentivizes using the other characters, but it almost forces you to, because like without Auron, you're not going to be breaking through those, heavy armor guys. So like you have to bring these guys in if you want to play the game without like taking forever.
Yeah.
So do you guys?
Yeah,
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was gonna move on to the second point, which he mentioned about the all the characters being present, right? And so in the original FF7, it's kind of sketchy for a lot of the reasons they give as to like, oh, we can only have 3 characters in this area. Like Bugenhagen's machine, we can only have 3 people go in for some reason, like, or it will stick out too much traveling the world as a group of 4 or more. So we got to split up into 3s or fewer, If you do it this way and have the characters all available and they can switch in and out of combat at all times, you can just change that part of the story and write the script and record all the voice acting as if every character is present for every major scene in the story. And so that would that way you don't have to write. Yeah, and you don't have to write like alternate dialogue. Like in the original game, it has alternate dialogue, but that's a lot easier to do when you don't have to voice all the lines. So, and then you also don't have to come up with reasons for 3 specific characters to be the ones that you have to use. Like even in the first part of the remake, they had awkward moments where like I think it was like Barret and Red 13 were like trying to move some rubble or something like in the Shinra Tower, and so but then there was a battle, so you had to use Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith for that point. And it's like, well, really, they just wanted you to use those 3 characters, and the needing to clear the path was an excuse as to why you couldn't pick Barret for that scenario. So they can avoid all that if they have a system where you can move in characters, you can swap them in at your will, and then all the characters can be present for every scene. So
that'd be a good change. Did you say you had a third point with this too?
Yes. The last piece would be if characters can swap in and out of battle, they're all going to need all their own materia, which would incentivize you to just have setups of materia on every character, right? So you're going to need a lot more materia than you did in the original game if you're going to have if you're going to use every character frequently. But then that would minimize on the time of swapping all my materia from Tifa to Red 13 because the story says I have to use Red 13 right now, And then as soon as Red 13, I don't want to use them anymore. Okay, let's put it back on Tifa or Vincent or whoever.
Right.
You can just set up materia setups for every character and maybe tweak them a little as you go. Like, oh, I need, as you do, like I need Vincent to have like a healing spell. He doesn't have one right now. Let's take it off of Aerith and put it on Vincent for now. Like you can do that. But if you're generally building materia setups for every character, then you're not going to need to do so much materia swapping from one character to another.
I just want like preset materia builds or equipment builds with preset materia that I can just save, because that was something I wanted in Final Fantasy 12 too with the Gambit setup, where I was just like, dude, I like this setup, but I kind of need to change it right now. Can I just save this to like a preset and just, automatically click it and just be good to go, So, but I mean, I can agree with you there.
Yeah, that's kind of what 14 does. You have like your gear sets, and you can set a gear set for. So let's say, for example, if I don't want to use my black mage, which is my main, and I want to mess around with a healer, I can like equip a whole set of healer equipment, and it's like all the best healer equipment that I have on the fly. And yeah, that would save a lot of time because it's so annoying. Because especially when you're playing on hard mode and you get to the damn scorpion boss guy, and you realize, oh shit, I don't have revive, and you spend 20 minutes in the fight, and you're like, oh god. And the only person left is Aerith, and she has her limit, and it doesn't do enough damage, and he dunks on you, and you have to start.
Oh man,
yeah,
because you didn't have one revive spell on her. It's like Barret had it, and then it's another one of those you forgot to hot swap it.
Yeah,
it'll be interesting to see what they do though with part 2. I mean, they could make a lot of those changes, but I mean, I already have like the third spell for fire and stuff like that at the end of the remake, so they're going to have to find a way to reset that without it being awkward, or else by the end of the second game, I'll for sure have just about everything, right?
Yeah, you'll be one-shotting the third game's enemies.
Unless it just goes up to like fire 9 or something like that, the fire, I don't know.
Whereas,
yeah, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger, but yeah. So yeah, I think those are some good gameplay suggestions though, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So totally agree. I think with me, I'm more from a story front. I want them to readdress Sephiroth and build him back up. We were talking about this before the podcast a little bit, but I mean, we just defeated God, so like the game builds up Sephiroth geniusly with, the flashbacks and, Sephiroth kills the dragon in one hit and it's like thrashing Cloud in one hit. Or you can't beat the Midgar Zolom, and then you get past with a chocobo and you see it like impaled on a tree.
Yeah.
It's just building Sephiroth up to be this just unfathomable power. And I think that's kind of undermined by the fact that I literally just killed God, and in the last portion of the game, Cloud was like cutting through trains and buildings and like, it was so like OP. So I think that they need to bring part 2 back down to earth. Let's focus on Sephiroth. let's kind of show that power dynamic. And if Sephiroth was just screwing with Cloud before, cool. Let's show that there's like just Sephiroth is like so above Cloud that he could just kill him like a fly. I want to feel that in part 2.
Or even like the twist, like the fact that when we find out that Sephiroth lost his mind and stuff when he finds out the truth about himself and whatever, like how are they going to do that when he's already set up as like a villain in like the first game? Like he's already like that, he's the obvious villain who is screwed up in the head or whatever. But like, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I don't think it would have that same impact now. Like they would have to change something. But
well, that's my one of my favorite things about Sephiroth. And this goes back to something Katase, who directed Final Fantasy VII, said in an interview, was that what inspired him for Sephiroth was the movie Jaws, where you don't see Jaws, but you feel his presence anytime Jaws is near. And he took that with Sephiroth, with the original. And I mean, you don't even see Sephiroth until his presence until the end of Midgar. If you think about it, that was a plot twist in of itself, because up to that point, you thought President Shinra was the enemy, right? And then like you've been fighting this guy for 5-6 hours. And then finally in like one night, you walk out and there's a sword through President Shinra's chest. And you're like, I thought you were the villain. And it's like, no, it's this guy, right?
Yeah.
So they need to build that back up.
And the crazy thing about that is it's not even him. Like he's still at the Northern Crater, like unconscious,
like chilling. Yeah.
Right.
Dudes. Yeah. It's insane. So you're right. And maybe they'll build him back up, but I don't know. There's some weird stuff at the end of the game where he's like, it almost makes it uncertain who the actual villain is going to be to me at the end of the 7 Remake Part 1. Cause it seems like Sephiroth is, I don't know. He's like oddly not as antagonistic as he seemed to be previously. I don't know. It's weird. And it's hard to judge or like gauge story stuff because we have no idea how much they're going to change. But yeah, that's a good point. We killed like the force that controls our fate. And it's like, what's Sephiroth now? Like what's Sephiroth supposed to put up? What kind of fight is he going to have? Like,
well, and I mean, like I said, we saw Cloud and he was like cutting through like buildings with his sword to get to Sephiroth. Like entire buildings were like floating and like Cloud just cut through one of them with his sword. Right. So when we get to the Midgar Zolom, are you kidding me? I just cut a train in a building in half. I can't handle this snake. I can't impale this thing on a tree.
Yeah. I wonder if, because they had to like step through like a portal or whatever, right?
That gave them special powers.
I don't know if they're going to say it was like an alternate reality or something.
Physics were so different.
See, so there's this rumor going around. I don't know. I might get this completely wrong, but because he kept grabbing his arm on the same spot where the geostigma was from Advent Children, in the remake, there was this idea that it was like blending the realities into one. Right. So like maybe he was getting like super powered up from like Advent Children, like the future him. Right. But now that they defeated God, he's back down to a regular Cloud. It's just, that's so convoluted. And like, how are they going to explain that?
Yeah. If you want things like the Midgar Zolom to land the way they did originally, you're going to need some sort of in-lore explanation as to why they can't do those amazing feats that they were capable of at the end. I don't know if there's a good reason. I can't think of one, like a good excuse, essentially, right, to pull their power level back down to where it should be, but they're gonna have to do something.
Yeah.
So
because I mean the original, anytime Cloud was near Sephiroth, he would fall to his knees, and I mean he gave the black materia to Sephiroth. So anyways, so that's my number 2. Where are we at with time? Okay, we're still good. So all right, who are we on? Riconius, number 3.
Sure. Well, it's funny because my third one was like, basically, what are we going to do with Sephiroth? Like,
that's a good.
But I mean, I guess, I mean, because I just have no idea. Like, where the first game ended, it was sort of like, well, the payoff to the setup of this like final boss villain being Sephiroth was like done. Like, they kind of jumped the shark with in terms of like having that happen right away. So I think like. Because we left off with everyone, starting to walk away from Midgar and continue, I guess, looking for Sephiroth, but also I have no idea like what their goal is because
The unknown journey.
right? Like
Yeah.
exactly now there's no. I don't think they even have the same incentive anymore. Like now the characters are like just wandering, like because they already. I don't know. But
Well, he's got
yeah,
that
so,
black feather that landed in his hand, right? And he's like, I need to find him, right? So there's the searching component that will kind of motivate them, I guess. But
we already know who's like now. It's like we already know who Sephiroth is. Like I don't know like how they'll.
Is the Nibelheim flashback and Calm going to be? Are they just going to start with that? Right?
Yeah.
Were they going to Sephiroth's backstory? I mean, yeah.
Or even with like Aerith being an ancient and like finding out like what Sephiroth's goal with her or whatever, like
how's that going to work with her like extra knowledge that she seems to have?
Like she already knows what is going to happen, or already knows.
So
everything.
Yeah, I think what they have to do here, honestly, and we'll see what they do. They might do something totally creative, but I think they just need to establish that, okay, we just did all this wacky stuff. We defeated this godlike being, and that was Aerith's connection to the planet. That's where she was getting all that knowledge. And then now that that's defeated, Aerith can just say, like my link to whatever I was getting before, every time I patted Red 13 on the head, I was seeing visions of the future. That future is no longer in existence. So she's no longer going to be fed information. They have to find some way to reset that because that girl knows way too much at the end of the game. I like her like getting like premonitions, but I don't, I want her to kind of be Aerith again.
Yeah. Yeah, and those premonitions, it almost seemed like, they were showing things from the original game. Like one of the last ones that I remember was meteor coming down, right? Was the meteor like hitting the planet and destroying it. But now it seems like all that's off the table because they broke the timeline. And that's hopefully they'll explain whether or not it was like Original 7 has happened, Original 7 is what is supposed to happen, or whatever else they come up with.
Yeah.
And honestly, that was confusing too from the that like vision of like where they were looking at, weren't they looking at like that video thing of like New Midgar or whatever, and then it just somehow like tripped, like it just became like this weird like apocalyptic kind of.
Barrett's like, they show this to kids.
Yeah, like that was because and that's when we see like some of those hooded guys, the other like Marco or whatever, with like their numbers and stuff. Like, so are we going to get like an Organization
Abrams.
13 and Final Fantasy, like what? Like an FF7 version of the Organization where they're all Sephiroths. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Sephiroth Xehanort, yeah.
Yeah, I think originally what it was, those guys were all like failed Genova infused experiments, right? And then like Sephiroth and you as Cloud are the only ones that didn't fail, even though you kind of did fail. You just didn't die. But so they're all kind of connected. But yeah, they kind of, this game's, I don't know.
Because now we have that dude, that Roach guy, who's also a soldier, isn't he?
Yeah, if they just completely forget about him, I'll be happy.
I know, yeah. He reminded me of like Kadaj and his brothers from.
Yeah.
Reminded me of Joe Dirt.
Soldier Joe. That's our nickname.
Oh man!
Don't cry, Azu.
Caleb, what'd you have for your number 3?
All right, so my number 3 is kind of a big shift, but I think it's what they should do with part 2. And I know there are many 4-letter words out there, but the one 3-letter word in the gaming community is DLC. Now, I think the best way to keep the integrity and the secrecy of part 1 is to release part 2 as they would an expansion to an MMO. And I think that kind of takes care of some of the stuff we've talked about. It doesn't justify the reason why the Midgar Zolom is so damn hard to kill in the new version, because like good before.
Right.
So it doesn't make up for that, but what it can make up for is like the gameplay version of it. It's like, okay, well now we can't just go kill everything because this new expansion, the max level is 70 or whatever they choose the max level to be. Because I think it's like what 50 in part 1 or something. Yeah, so obviously I honestly think they're setting it up to be something similar to this and it does two things. The first thing it does is you don't have to buy another $400 version of the game that's part 2, which I'm hoping that I don't have to do because I will if they have it.
Well, you didn't have to do the first one either, but I feel like
so I can do it. But it also keeps the secret alive, right? It keeps the fact that Final Fantasy VII Remake isn't the same game as Final Fantasy VII, and I think releasing part 2 would kind of let the cat out of the bag if it was released solo. And then also I think another reason to release it as DLC is because I don't know of anyone who's going to play part 2 and not part 1, unless they know part 1 is mostly Midgar and they remember, wow, Midgar was kind of the boring, like closed in part of the game. I want to play part 2. I think that's kind of like a gatekeeping method to make sure that you don't blow the whole secret, the fact that the game isn't the same game as Final Fantasy VII Original. Because I've got a guy at work that's playing it and he has mixed feelings on it right now, but he has no idea what's coming. And I was like, oh, just keep playing it. Just keep playing it. And like he's like, well, they're changing some stuff. It's kind of weird. I don't know what's going on. And I'm like, oh, just keep going. You got to just keep going. And it's like, it's totally changed by the end, right? And the way to ensure that kind of secret stays is by having part 2 released as like a DLC chunk instead. And I think it should be fully a full game. Again, I mean, I think it should be part 2 and it should be a full experience, another 50 hours. I put like 100 hours in doing both playthroughs and the super boss. And I kind of want it to be really big, but I think adding it as a DLC will kind of help the integrity of the whole secret and like the whole genius of the marketing behind the game, because they marketed it as exactly what I was afraid it was going to be, which is we redid 7, and it's like, well, yeah, they kind of redid 7. They redid a lot of the like physical aspects of it, but they are also retelling 7 in like a different way, and in a way that's like intriguing and interesting, and you're not sure if it's if 7 actually happened or if 7 is destined to happen, and then you kind of like are altering that course, and by putting it in sort of a DLC or a part 2 that's contingent on you playing part 1 at the very least, kind of keeps that secret alive. And I don't know how alive it is anyways. Like, I don't know how spoiled people are on the game, but I played it like, I finished it like a month after it was out, and I had no idea,
Yeah, like I saw. Well, I think that I'm not a good test case because I'm on an RPG podcast, so I'm just naturally going to be hit over the head with stuff. But I had an idea because I saw people were unhappy about it. I saw little tidbits with, the ending that, they kind of were doing like a time loop type thing, but I wasn't quite sure what to expect entirely. And for the most part, I would say 85% of the game, I'm right with you. Like I was happy with a lot of the changes. Wall Market was better. The Avalanche was better. Like it would, like I liked a lot of the stuff with it, but holy crap. I think like that moment Sephiroth steps out of like this portal, I was like, okay, this is getting a little a little out of hand, I think, because I was just like, you didn't need to change it that much, but I get where you're coming from. That's, part 2, you don't know where they're going to go with it. And yeah, I can see having the DLC component, I guess, with just, seeing where you go with that. But yeah, I see where you're coming from.
I think if they do go that route with the DLC, or more of like a traditional RPG expansion kind of route for the story, I think it's highly likely that there will still be like part 2 on a disc that you can get that comes with part 1, maybe for the next gen consoles or something. Because I think they'll be worried that if like part 2 is just you need part 1 installed on your machine in order to purchase it and then like launch the game from there, they'll be worried that like, oh, we're limiting our potential customers because maybe a lot of people waited on part 1 because they weren't sure, or they're like waiting for the whole thing to come out. So I bet they will probably bundle part 1 and 2 when 2 comes out for a little bit more of a, like if if part 2, just the DLC portion, is, I don't know, $50 or $60, like we're postulating, I guess, then they would release a bundle of like part 1 and 2 for $80 on PlayStation 5, maybe something like that.
Yeah, make it kind of like a season of a TV show. It's like Game of Thrones season 8 came out, so you can buy all the seasons with 8. It's not just. And if you have 1 through 7 already, or a collection of the other ones, then you can just buy it as a standalone instead. Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, because in Game of Thrones case, if someone like me who hasn't watched anything, like, I'm not going to buy 8 by itself. But yeah, if you bundle everything and 8 together, all of a sudden it's more enticing. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, because they are going to have that problem, right? Where invariably less people are going to buy part 2 than part 1. Ideally, well, not ideally, but that's just going to be what happens. So
it's common, yeah. With like other stuff we've seen, like Xenosaga, that came out part 1, 2, 3. Like part 1 sold the most, and then it was just
downhill from there. Yeah,
yeah. Some people didn't go on to the sequel.
Yeah, for sure. Stan, what do you have for your number 3?
My number 3, which I think we might have mentioned a little bit ago, was to improve the side quest design. The side quests, I felt like a lot of them were very fetch questy, or just go out to this area you've already been, kill this monster that will now spawn there since you've activated the side quest, come back, bring the item back to the NPC, short conversation, and then like the quest is complete. There was a few, like the Angel of the Slums quest, which was like integrated into the story better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they need to set the bar for their side quests like at that level of that quest, that Angel of the Slums quest. Every side quest should feel like at that level or better, because you had some that were just annoying, like go find my 3 cats, right? And I'm thinking to myself, this would make sense if like Cloud was like, I'm not finding your cats, like I'm a soldier, like this is a waste of my time. And then maybe you play as Tifa to like find the cats if you absolutely have to, and she can be
Aerith or something.
Yeah, something like that, right? But like tie it into the story and the characters better. That would be my general advice, because I don't want to go into Cosmo Canyon and Bugenhagen is like, find my 5 components, otherwise I need to get my telescope working or whatever. Like that's just.
I can't find my floating ball. I need someone to find my floating ball. Yeah.
It feels like you're stretching out the content of the game rather than giving you more worthwhile content that like you're going to enjoy. So that would be another big improvement that I think they need to make.
One aspect that I really enjoyed in Witcher 3 that I think 7 Remake Part 2 could take on that note is, Witcher 3 has like a philosophy behind it of non-intervention, right? So every kind of, not every side quest, but most of them have some kind of element of that where Geralt has to make a choice, and it kind of lets you know about the world through the side quests. So it kind of builds on the world building. And I think that they needed to incorporate that in part 1. I was kind of disappointed by that the side quests weren't enhancing the cruelty of Shinra. I was finding cats instead. But, for part 2, I think that they could build on that a little bit and kind of, maybe for Fort Condor, right? The side quest could be recruiting people for Fort Condor or something along those lines. I want something that's going to improve on the world building. I don't want it to just be like 15 where we're finding frogs or go to the field and kill this monster.
Yeah, Dave in his outhouse. Like, gotta save Dave.
Got these tags. Yeah.
I got some tags for you. Yeah. I think that would be a good way to incorporate kind of what you were talking about earlier too, to make the leap between open world and kind of linear. I think the side quests can play a part in that because I don't know, it just seems like a game like Final Fantasy 12. I think the side quests in that are like amazing. They're so good. Like each of the hunts have like a backstory behind it. It's like a guy whose bride died in the floods or something like that, and she's like, her lost soul is wandering trying to find the ring that he proposed to her with, and you have to go kill the frog that like swallowed the ring.
Right.
When you do that soul is like released, and it's like, oh, it's super happy. And then like they all have kind of meaning. What they could do with the 7 stuff, they could use that to kind of flesh out the world a little better. Like you were saying, like make it seem more of a threat, make Shinra seem like more of a bad guy, even though it's probably too late now, obviously.
He's dead. Yeah.
Yeah, he's kind of dead, but the son's still, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, Shinra's presence is still going to be felt. I mean, that is one thing about the original that was good. Every town you went to the mood was generally depressed because of something regarding Shinra. Everyone's like, oh, things were great until that reactor came here, and now it's so polluted we can't breathe, and the whole town's gone to crap. So I mean, there is that component. In Fort Condor, you fight Shinra and stuff like that. So I mean, they could still build on that presence, I think.
Yeah, I hope they make Fort Condor like a huge mini game. I think that'd be really fun. Like you're saying, it's almost like a blitzball kind of thing, except for you're killing each other.
Dude, I hope there's more than 4 people in that damn tower.
Yeah. It's like, how are you guys holding this off, man? Like, we need to recruit these guys. Like, forget the dog and the redneck space guy. Like, let's get these dudes in here. These guys are holding this board off.
Yeah.
How many years now? It's like there's like 2 people here.
Yeah, recently that's one thing I noticed when I replayed it recently. I was like, dude, there's like 2 people in the shop. There's one guy at like the table, and he's like drinking a beer or something, and then there's the other guy at the lookout at the top. And I was like, yeah, you guys are, no wonder you're hiring me, because you guys can't do anything. So
yeah. That's like one of the things about the world of FF. It's like, that's something I noticed when I was playing Final Fantasy 2. I'd be walking around town, and I'd leave town, and I'd just get like my ass kicked right outside of town. And I was like, man, are all of these townspeople just like level 60 plus? Like, they're just armed to the teeth. The innkeeper, she walks out and she's got this huge Gatling gun on her hip, and like the feral dogs outside the village come up, and she's just like just mowing them down by the dozen. Because I take one step out of this town and I'm getting laid out.
yeah.
Is that the whole point? Is like, we're just a bunch of kids, and our leveling up is nothing in comparison to the adults. And like,
Yeah, you just suck. Yeah.
Yeah, we're just trash. Everyone else is. That's why there's like 6 people left alive. Only the strongest survive in these worlds.
One of them's the shopkeeper. Yeah.
Yeah. The shopkeeper was the final boss of the last game.
with the slowly dwindling clientele. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny. I think for me, like my final thing here is just, and I'm kind of mixed on it, and I want to get you guys' opinion. You think Aerith's death, well, assuming that they're going to kill Aerith, you think Aerith's death should be at the end of part 2, assuming this is a 3-part game? Or do you think that it should be in part 3? Because I feel like the motivation for that kind of carries you through to the end of the game. But at the same time, I feel like that's like a big moment. And I feel like that needs to be in part 2, just to kind of set Sephiroth up.
I think I don't know. There's 2 ways I would do it. I would either start the game in the Nibelheim flashback,
okay,
and then end part 2 at Nibelheim as you leave. And
okay,
that would
so
kind of
she
be
would
like
still
a nice.
Oh.
Yeah, that would be kind of a nice bookend. Like you started the game seeing Nibelheim in the flashback, you end it, like going there and kind of seeing how it is now.
So
And
you would
for some
err on
reason
the
it's
side
his
of
name.
her not dying in part 2 then?
Yeah, and then or you go all the way to the Temple of the Ancients, where she leaves the party. And
See,
then,
I think that's where it would need to end if they were going to do it.
yeah,
seems
and then
like the mystery.
you end the game right there, and Cloud is like feeling terrible about what he did, and you kind of have a cliffhanger going into part 3. Like he's like, I got to go after her, but the game ends.
I mean,
And then that would be
assuming they don't do
where you
the
could end it.
yeah, assuming they don't do the DLC thing like Kaleb was saying. I mean, I think that would be a good place to end it. It's just, I kind of feel like her death is going to have more impact if it's on the same game that like all the dating stuff and all the interaction stuff happens. I mean, is it going to have more impact if you wait 4 years after number 2 for part 3 to come out, and then she dies in the first 6 hours? Or maybe they might make it happen later, but I I kind of feel like it needs to happen with all the other character stuff. Otherwise, I mean, that's going to be a longer span of time that people are going to look up to see what happens. I mean, it's just, so I kind of feel like it needs to happen in the same game.
In this one, in part 2, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's tough because of like seeing how much time they did spend in one relatively small section of the game, like with just focusing on Midgar. So like wondering like how if they would do that with all the other sections outside of Midgar. So like would the second part even end like disc 1? You know what I mean? Like because of like how much I don't know. I mean, I don't know like what they're, if they'll like kind of speed up the pace and just have us end at disc 1 in part 2. Like, so yeah, if Aerith dies, then like,
because that would be a hell of a closing to the game.
Yeah,
it would. Yeah,
and that would get some. I think that would get some sales for part 3. So
yeah, because it's like, you know, like it can't end like, because that's how I felt after I finished like disc 1. I'm like, well, what the heck? This can't be it. Like, and then it says, you know, you have to play. Well, I was playing the remaster, re-release, or whatever. So like, it would say like, you know, continue part 2 or whatever. And so I was just like, what? Okay.
Well, I mean,
okay, there's more.
I'm just envisioning the final cutscene with Cloud just dropping Aerith into the water, right? And everything like that, and it just closing the credits. Anyways, Kaleb, what do you think?
Yeah.
I think if they're going to kill her, I think they should kill her in part 2. And I think that if they don't kill her, what they'll either do is just not do that section in part 2, or they'll have like a fade to black. Like Sephiroth will come down, and then like you'll
That'll
hear
piss
like,
me off.
Oh my god! Don't, no, not that. Complete all the side quests to see what happens after the credits.
Yeah, you'll hear like the clang of metal on metal, and then it just cuts to black. So it's like, did somebody block her? Did he stab through her to the floor? Like, oh my god!
It just shows
happened?
like a squirt of blood on the ground. You don't know whose blood it is.
Yeah. It's like
it's clouds.
It's Cait
It's
Smith.
like Yo Jimbo scene where you just like get the poppies and just blood spray, and like it sprays on the wall, and then that's where it ends.
Part 3 starts, and it's like Aerith with like a hot dog and a ketchup bottle, right?
Yeah. Like, oh, sorry. Cloud's like, sorry, I thought you were brandishing a weapon at me. Yeah. But I think if they are going to kill her, which I'm not convinced that they're going to now. Because I mean, we've had like all these jokes and these memes over the years of like, oh, if Square Enix wanted to make $1 million, they'd give like a DLC where Aerith lives. And I'm like, you know, I don't know. I think it's important that she dies, especially for the extended universe stuff, because it's all centered around the fact that Cloud never got over Aerith, which I kind of don't like.
Well, he kind of loses his mind too because of her death, because he felt responsible, right? Or somewhat responsible.
Yeah, so it's like a big plot point, not only for the original game, but for the extended universe that they have incorporated thus far. And maybe they won't worry about it. That's one of the things that I always kind of disliked, was to me, like with Cloud, and you know, I feel like at the end of the game, he became like way more, him and Tifa were like the item now. Cause like,
right.
That scene where he's reaching up and he thinks it's Aerith, and then like it shows that it's actually Tifa, and then Tifa saves him. And I think that's him moving on from his like, I don't know, summer love with Aerith was like fleeting, quick thing. And now he's accepted that Tifa is the right one for him the whole time. And so maybe they won't kill her. And I mean, if they don't kill her, then that, of course, that whole situation between all three of them, because like the remake, I think did a good job of making you really like Aerith a lot. I feel anyway, with this remake part 1. So like if she doesn't die, that's going to be a real hard decision to like, oh man, who do I want this guy to end up with? Because like they're both awesome.
And I think also though, because of how likable she is in the remake, then like if she does die, it would be it would just be heartbreaking. Like
maybe what they do is they play with it and they make it seem like she's not going to die. It's like a Walking Dead thing where it's like everyone knows it's going it's going to be Glenn, and then it's like, oh, they killed the redhead. And then like, oh, he kills Glenn like 2 seconds later. You're like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And it was spoiled and I was still surprised. And I was like, I can't believe I can actually say that in one sentence. Like it was spoiled for me, but I was still surprised when it happened.
Yeah.
So maybe we'll do something like that where like you thought it was going to happen at this one point and it's like really, really, really building it up and then it doesn't happen. And then they just kill her like minutes later. Maybe it's like, oh wow, I can't believe they saved Aerith, and then she just gets hacked down,
She slips off a step or something.
Yeah, something stupid, yeah.
No, I mean, I've seen like I can, of all the possibilities of whether she dies, she lives, the one that I've heard that I like the least is that they kill Tifa instead. Because like that just
It would be shocking.
It would be shocking.
That would be a shock, yeah.
But like she plays into that like that plot twist when like Cloud thinks he's like a puppet of Genova, right?
Yeah.
Because Sephiroth's like, you were never here, right, Tifa? But like Aerith can't fulfill that role. You need Tifa to be there.
Well, that's the thing. Like, that's why people think it might happen, because if that's the thing that put Cloud back together and made him strong enough to defeat Sephiroth.
But that's also the reason he believed what Sephiroth said, because Tifa was there, because he wasn't believing Sephiroth, right?
Oh, true. Yeah.
But Tifa was like, no, Cloud, I'm sorry, I didn't say it earlier, but I don't remember you were here. Because he wasn't believing Sephiroth until Tifa was like, yeah, I don't remember seeing you here.
Yeah. And then Sephiroth later is like, just kidding, you were here, but you weren't in the picture. You were one of the blue suits. And you're just like, oh, God, what's happening? What's happening to my brain?
Plot twist on top of a plot twist. Yeah.
I can't handle it. And then he gets in the wheelchair and then he like nods off.
Yeah, I wonder if they're going to have that loud creaking sound like they had for the wheelchair in the original.
Really loud, yeah.
Obnoxious, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, that's true. Like, I think it's going to be a surprise if they do kill her, and it's not that I don't think they will. I think they're going to make it. They're going to make it like a really surprising event, like it was supposed to be in the original. Because there's a lot. I was spoiled on the original one. Like I knew that she was going to die, kind of a thing. So I never experienced that like, oh shit moment of like, whoa, they just killed one of my, my main healer here. Like, what's going on? Disc ends, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, I kind of knew it was coming, but I was like 12, so I convinced myself that there was like maybe if I really beat a boss or something, I thought there was a way to prevent it, right? So
yeah,
but I've grown up since then. Anyways, so I guess we'll have to see. I mean, the only other thing I could think of is if they kind of traded the President Shinra killing style of the original with Aerith. It would be pretty shocking if you just walked into like one of the City of the Ancients rooms and there's Aerith like on like an altar with like a sword through her chest. You didn't even get to see it. Like, it would just be.
That would kind of suck.
Yeah, what if you just had it as Tifa and she's like, oh, yeah, don't go in that room, Cloud. Why not? You're like, no, just don't go in there. Don't go in there.
Yeah, I mean, some people have speculated that maybe Cloud will be the one that does it, because remember in the game you have to press X a bunch of times to prevent Cloud from like shaking.
If they did that and like this time Cloud does do it, like that would be even worse, or not worse, and like that it'd be bad. I just mean it'd be like,
dude, that would be like, I would like the balls on that would be epic, and like that would rival the original for me because
that case would have to come with one of those little like truck ball sack things on the bottom of it. Like, oh man, I get it now. I get the balls.
Yeah,
that would be crazy. I could see something like that happening though, and that would kind of make it,
because he would have a mental breakdown from that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would make him snap.
But then I could see people freaking out like a Last of Us 2 situation, like you just had Cloud kill Aerith, so
yeah.
But I respect it.
Yeah, I haven't beaten that yet, but I was surprised at how early on they did the thing with the one guy. I was like, Jesus, like 3 hours in, and they're like, get him with the club. Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I think if they're gonna kill her though, I think it would be good to have it as like the end of this next disc. If it's a 3-disc game or a 3-part game, but like you guys are saying, with the scale, I mean, who knows how big this thing is going to be? Honestly, they can milk this until that teat is dry, and it is far from dried up. So I don't
We
know.
just did Midgar. That's all we did.
Yeah,
And yeah,
I paid $330 for Midgar. Like, I never thought I'd do that in my life.
Yeah,
like it had a lot of content, but it was still like
yeah.
still just Midgar.
it just annoys me when I see people that have never played the original Final Fantasy VII, but they only played the remake, and now they have opinions on Final Fantasy VII, and I'm like that's cool, but no, you've like 4 hours. That's all you've gotten. you know?
Yeah.
But it's cool, man. They feel part of it. So, all right. So, anything else you guys want to bring up before we wrap this up?
We covered a lot.
Yeah, I think we did more than.
Oh, you reminded me earlier about that was the other thing that was confusing me with like Cait Sith showing up, and like he was like mourning, like when they were on the zip lining thing. It was Cloud Tifa and Barret, and then you see Cait Sith show up, and he's like, "Oh no," like or whatever, and then it's like, wait, why was he there? Like, so that's what confused me about the whole like timeline thing. Like, did he like?
When the plate was dropping and Cait Sith was there and he was, dude, that was,
That's so confusing.
I saw
very awkward. Yeah,
it reminds me of like Randy in the South Park episode of Make Love Not Warcraft, where like in real life he's reacting as if he actually got killed in real life in the game. Because Reeve is controlling Cait Sith as this robot, and he's like, "All right, get him down on his knees and like scream at the sky," and it's so bizarre. It's like no one's there to see that. It's a robot cat like, no!
It confused people that never played the original. Everyone I saw that never played the original, when they talked about the plate dropping, they were all like, what's up with that cat?
Like where the hell is the cat from? Like, who is that?
Totally out of place.
Which was like one of the first things that kind of like told me like, hey, this game is actually not just remaking 7. Like there's going to be more, that's connected to the original. And like, so I was even thinking like, wasn't there like what was it with like the black materia or something? Or no. Didn't one of the Cait Sith like robot thingies, like, didn't it like
in the City of the Ancients
when it got exploded, or imploded, I guess.
It imploded, but what if like are they gonna retcon it like, oh no, he time traveled and that's why he was in you know what I mean? Like something like that. Like, because I was thinking that when that happened, I'm like, is that what happened? Did he not die? Or did that not like implode? Did it just send him here?
And I think in the original they just like he came back with like another robot body, right? So they just replaced him immediately.
Yeah, because the cat's the robot. The doll is just, I don't know. I don't understand. It's like the doll is the robot that the cat controls. It's like Mickey Mouse having a dog as a pet kind of thing. It's like, okay, I don't know. I understand what's going on here. You're both animals, but
I was so disappointed when I saw that because I was hoping they were going to get rid of that component because I love Final Fantasy VII, but Cait Sith is so freaking stupid. Like this idea that some guy just sits in like he controls it from a computer 24/7 or something, or it's mind control, or it's stupid. That's what it is.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like a robot controlled by Reeve, but like they don't explain that at all in the remake part 1. And honestly, in the original game, it's like the translation is so awful sometimes where it's like, okay, I think this is what it is. But yeah, that would be hilarious if that's what they justify it as. It's like the black hole actually brought him to here, and it's like Cait Sith being like, no, I was trying to get the black materia. Now I'm here. What is this?
Of all the
alternative is like Reeve is like getting this little robot. He's got his little video game controller. He's like walking this cat robot up there to like react to the death of all these people, which is also equally bizarre because he still works for Shinra. He can like watch it on the camera and be like, damn, that was heavy.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
breaking out the robot.
Wouldn't it make more sense if he's just like in his office, like and like watching the camera, like on a laptop, and he's just like, "Oh no, like what's happening?" Rather than like, let me boot up my robot and have it act instead.
It seems like too many extra steps. Yeah, it's like, all right, let me power on the robot, put in the batteries.
Instead of banging on the desk myself, I'm gonna like control the cat to do it. Like it's. Yeah, it doesn't make sense at all, for sure. So, and of all the characters to have a cameo experience, in the part, Sid, that maybe he was on an airship or something. He had some options, but what are you gonna do?
I don't know.
At least it was only 5 seconds. So, all right. So I think that's going to wrap us up for today. Thank you both for coming out and talking with us. It's been fun going over some of the stuff they can do in part 2. We'll just have to see if they actually take some of this advice from our, podcast with millions of listeners. Hopefully they can, jot down some notes. But real quick again, Riconius, what's your Twitch handle again, and your app name that they can find your comic on?
Sure. My Twitch is Riconius Live. I just live stream many games. And then Saturday AM Global Comics. You can even find their website, saturday-am.com. Yeah, that's my stuff right now.
Very cool. And Kaleb, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter at UFF Podcast. You can listen to my shows, Nudeclan Podcast, a video game show, and then also Ultima Final Fantasy, the ultimate Final Fantasy podcast, anywhere you get podcasts, and on YouTube and all that stuff. So that's where I'm at.
Very cool. And if you guys want to check them out, there will be links in the description, so you can check down there if you weren't able to jot that down. Thank you again, gents, for joining us this week. It's been a blast, but we'll have to catch you again in the future. All right, guys, that's going to wrap us up. We'll see you all next week. Take it easy.
See you next time.